December 9, 1945. World War II is over, but for General George S. Patton, a deadlier war has just begun. In the ruins of Mannheim, a low-speed collision silences America's most dangerous commander. Did a tragic accident stop Old Blood and Guts? Did his powerful adversaries have a hand in his demise? The answer lies buried in a web of intrigue, lost reports, and whispers of assassination. The autumn of 1945 was a season of bitter discontent for General Patton. The warrior who had carved a bloody path from the shores of Normandy to the heart of the Third Reich found himself a conqueror without a war. His command of the mighty U.S. Third Army, the instrument of his military genius, had been stripped from him in October. The official reason, as documented in declassified National Archive reports, was his controversial handling of the denazification process in Bavaria. Patton, ever the pragmatist, argued that experienced German administrators were needed to prevent the complete collapse of civil society, a view that clashed violently with the Allied High Command's policies. In a private letter to his wife Beatrice, he seethed, "I have been given a paper army. They are trying to shut me up." This paper army was the 15th, a unit tasked not with combat, but with compiling a historical account of the war in Europe. For a man of action like Patton, it was a gilded cage, an insult veiled as an honor. He felt sidelined, betrayed by the very men he had fought alongside. His diaries from this period, now held in the Library of Congress, are filled with frustration and a growing sense of dread. He saw the Soviet Union not as an ally, but as the next great threat to Western civilization. He openly advocated for rearming the Wehrmacht and confronting the Red Army before it could consolidate its grip on Eastern Europe, a stance that was dangerously at odds with the political climate of the time and deeply alarmed his superiors in Washington and at SHAEF headquarters. His relationship with his old friend and superior, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, had grown increasingly strained. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander, was a politician in uniform, a master of coalition warfare who understood the delicate dance of diplomacy. Patton was a pure warrior, blunt and uncompromising. He saw Eisenhower's cautious post-war policies as a betrayal of the victory they had won. "Ike is the best general the British have," Patton once quipped, a cutting remark that underscored the deep ideological chasm that had opened between them. This friction was not merely personal. It was a fundamental disagreement over the future of Europe and America's role in it. Patton's outspoken anti-Soviet rhetoric was becoming a significant political liability. He made no secret of his disdain for the Russians, telling his staff, "The politicians in Washington are playing with fire by letting the Russians get so strong." He believed he was being watched, his every word recorded. Declassified OSS documents confirmed that Patton was indeed under surveillance. His phone was tapped, his movements monitored. He was a loose cannon, a powerful and popular figure who was dangerously off-message. He was a problem that, for some, needed to be solved. He was scheduled to fly home to the United States on December 10th, a return he both longed for and dreaded. The day before his departure, Sunday, December 9th, dawned cold and gray. Restless and bored, Patton decided to go on one last pheasant hunt near the city of Speyer. His companion for the day was his loyal chief of staff, Major General Hobart Hap Gay. The two men had been through the crucible of war together, and Gay was one of the few people Patton still trusted implicitly. They set out from Patton's headquarters in Bad Nauheim in his official staff car, a 1938 Cadillac Model 75, driven by Private First-Class Horace Woodring. The Cadillac was a chariot fit for a king, a heavy, powerful machine that had carried the general across thousands of miles of war-torn Europe. But on this day, it would become his tomb. As they drove along the rain-slicked Autobahn, Patton, seated in the right rear passenger seat, pointed out the sights, his voice a low rumble against the hum of the engine. He was in a reflective mood, recounting tales of Roman legions who had marched along these same paths centuries before. The war was over, and the old warrior was, for a moment, at peace. At approximately 11:45 a.m., as they approached a railroad crossing in the Mannheim suburb of Kaffertal, the idyllic scene was shattered. A 2.5-ton GMC Army truck, seemingly out of nowhere, made a sudden, inexplicable left turn directly into the path of the Cadillac. PFC Woodring, a veteran driver who had chauffeured the general for years, slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched on the wet pavement, but it was too late. The impact was not a high-speed, catastrophic collision, but a low-speed, grinding crash. The truck's fender crumpled the front of the Cadillac, shattering the radiator and sending a shower of glass into the road. Inside the car, the laws of physics were unforgiving. While General Gay and PFC Woodring were braced for the impact and escaped with minor or no injuries, Patton, who had been looking out the side window, was thrown forward. His head struck the steel partition or the clock mounted behind the driver's seat with brutal force. There was a sickening crack, a sound that would echo through history. He slumped back into his seat, his body suddenly limp. The indomitable general, the man they called Old Blood and Guts, was paralyzed. General Gay rushed to his side. "Are you hurt, General?" he asked, his voice tight with alarm. Patton's reply, recorded in Gay's official report of the incident, was chillingly calm. "I think I am, Hap. I'm having trouble breathing." He then looked at his friend, his eyes clear and lucid, and uttered the words that would become his epitaph. "This is a hell of a way to die." Chaos erupted at the scene. Military police arrived, but the initial assessment, as Lieutenant Joseph Shanahan, a former provost marshal of the Third Army, would later state, was that it was a trivial accident. The driver of the truck, a technical sergeant named Robert L. Thompson, was whisked away from the scene. No formal investigation was immediately launched. The focus was on getting the gravely injured general to a hospital. An ambulance was called, and Patton was carefully extricated from the mangled Cadillac. He was rushed to the 130th Station Hospital in Heidelberg, a sprawling military medical facility. The doctors who examined him were shocked. The X-rays confirmed their worst fears. General George S. Patton had suffered a severe compression fracture of the third and fourth cervical vertebrae. His spinal cord was crushed. He was paralyzed from the neck down. The prognosis was grim, but Patton, ever the fighter, refused to surrender. He was conscious, his mind as sharp as ever, trapped inside a broken body. For 12 days, the world held its breath. News of the accident made headlines around the globe. His wife, Beatrice, flew from the United States to be by his side. The hospital became a fortress with guards posted at his door. The official medical bulletins, released daily, spoke of a slow but steady improvement. Patton himself remained optimistic, dictating letters and even joking with the nurses. He was determined to walk again, to ride his beloved horses, to return to the life he had fought so hard to preserve. Behind the scenes, a team of the world's top neurosurgeons was assembled. They consulted on his case, debating the risks of surgery. But the damage was too severe. Any attempt to operate could kill him instantly. They were forced to rely on traction, a medieval-looking contraption of weights and pulleys designed to immobilize his neck and allow the bones to heal. For a man of Patton's restless energy, the enforced stillness was a form of torture. Then on December 20th, his condition took a sudden, drastic turn for the worse. He began to have difficulty breathing. The doctors diagnosed a pulmonary embolism. A blood clot formed in his paralyzed limbs had traveled to his lungs. It was a common complication in such cases, a silent killer that stalked the beds of the immobilized. The fighter's body was beginning to fail him. On the afternoon of December 21st, 1945, 12 days after the crash, the final battle ended. General George S. Patton, Jr. died in his sleep. The official cause of death was listed as pulmonary edema and congestive heart failure. The warrior was gone, but the questions surrounding his death were just beginning. Was it truly a tragic, random accident, or was it the final successful act in a meticulously planned assassination? A conspiracy to silence a man who knew too much and was not afraid to speak. The lack of an autopsy, the missing reports, and the whispers from the shadows would ensure that the mystery of Patton's death would endure. A final, haunting chapter in the life of a true American legend. The death of General George S. Patton, Jr. on December 21st, 1945, sent shockwaves through the Allied world. The official narrative was clear: a tragic, low-speed automobile accident, followed by a fatal pulmonary embolism in a Heidelberg hospital. But beneath the surface of this tidy explanation, a darker story was beginning to emerge. Why was there no formal military investigation into the crash that paralyzed America's most famous combat general? Why did the truck driver, Robert L. Thompson, vanish from the historical record shortly after the incident? And why, most crucially, was no autopsy performed on the body of a man whose death was so politically convenient for so many? As the Cold War began to cast its long shadow over Europe, The silence surrounding Patton's final days became deafening. The immediate aftermath of the accident was marked by a series of glaring irregularities. Lieutenant Joseph Shanahan, a former provost marshal of Patton's Third Army, would later testify that the U.S. Army conducted no official investigation of the crash. By the time the MPs got there was nothing to report, he stated. They considered it a trivial accident at the time. This lack of scrutiny is staggering, given the stature of the victim. In any other circumstance, a collision involving a four-star general would have triggered an exhaustive inquiry, with every detail meticulously documented. Instead, the reports that were filed seemed to disappear into a bureaucratic black hole. The driver of the GMC truck, Technical Sergeant Robert L. Thompson, was a figure of intense interest. Witnesses at the scene reported that Thompson appeared to be waiting for Patton's car, and his sudden left turn into the Cadillac's path was described as deliberate and inexplicable. Yet Thompson was never charged with any crime. He was quickly moved from Germany to England, ostensibly for his own protection, and then faded into obscurity. His service records, which should have contained a detailed account of the incident, were later found to be missing or heavily redacted. For a man who had just caused the death of a national hero, Thompson was treated with a remarkable degree of leniency and discretion. The decision not to perform an autopsy on General Patton is perhaps the most suspicious element of the entire affair. His wife Beatrice reportedly requested that no post-mortem examination be conducted, a wish that the military authorities were all too happy to grant. In the absence of an autopsy, the official cause of death, a pulmonary embolism, remains a medical assumption, not a proven fact. This lack of forensic evidence has fueled decades of speculation that Patton may have been poisoned in his hospital bed, a theory that gained significant traction with the emergence of new, chilling testimony from the shadows of the intelligence world. Patton was laid to rest on December 24, 1945, in the Luxembourg American Cemetery and Memorial in Ham, Luxembourg. He was buried among the men of his beloved Third Army, a final, poignant tribute to the warrior who had led them to victory. But even in death, Patton remained a figure of controversy. His grave, initially located in the center of the cemetery, was later moved to its current position at the head of the graves, a move that some saw as a final attempt to isolate him, even in the afterlife. The man who had lived his life in the spotlight was now consigned to the quiet, orderly rows of a military cemetery, his secrets buried with him. The first major crack in the official story appeared in 1979, when a former OSS assassin named Douglas Bazada gave a series of sensational interviews to the publication Spotlight. Bazada, a highly decorated veteran of the Office of Strategic Services, made a claim that would rewrite history. He had been ordered to kill General Patton. According to Bazada, the order came directly from William Wild Bill Donovan, the legendary head of the OSS Donovan, a man who operated in the world of black ops, implausible deniability, allegedly viewed Patton as a threat to the post-war order and a liability to the burgeoning relationship between the United States and the Soviet Union. Bazada's account of the assassination plot was chillingly detailed. He claimed that he and a mysterious accomplice, whom he knew only as the Pole, had been tracking Patton for weeks. On the morning of December 9th, they were positioned along the route of the pheasant hunt. Bazada alleged that he used a specially designed low-velocity projectile, possibly a rubber bullet or a lead pellet, to strike Patton in the neck as the truck collided with the Cadillac. This, he claimed, was the true cause of the general's paralysis, a staged accident designed to look like a random mishap. But the plot did not end there. When the accident failed to kill Patton immediately, Bazada claimed that the conspirators moved to the next phase of the operation. He alleged that Patton was poisoned in the 131st Station Hospital with a refined form of cyanide, a substance that could mimic the symptoms of a pulmonary embolism or heart failure. This poison, he claimed, was administered by an agent who had infiltrated the hospital staff. Bazada's testimony, while dismissed by many as the ramblings of an aging operative, was grounded in a deep knowledge of OSS tactics and a personal acquaintance with the key figures involved. The motive for such a high-level assassination was rooted in the volatile politics of the early Cold War. Patton was a vocal and influential critic of the Soviet Union, a man who openly advocated for a preemptive strike against the Red Army. He was also a man who knew too much. He had threatened to take the lid off and expose the failures of the Allied High Command, including the decision to allow the Soviets to capture Berlin and Prague. His declassified diaries and letters reveal a man who felt he was being silenced by his own government. For the architects of the post-war world, Patton was a loose cannon who could blow the entire geopolitical structure apart. The target Patton theory, as explored by author Robert K. Wilcox in his meticulously researched book, suggests a vast conspiracy involving not only the OSS but also the Soviet NKVD. Wilcox argues that both the Americans and the Russians had a vested interest in Patton's demise. The Soviets in particular viewed Patton as their most dangerous adversary, a man who understood their true intentions and was not afraid to act. Declassified Soviet archives have since revealed that Stalin himself was deeply concerned about Patton's rhetoric and had ordered his intelligence services to monitor the general's every move. The psychological profile of Patton in his final months is that of a man out of time. He was a 19th century warrior in a 20th century world, a man who believed in the absolute necessity of victory and the inherent danger of compromise. His refusal to play the political game made him an outcast in the very army he had helped to build. He was a man of immense ego and unwavering conviction, a combination that made him both a brilliant commander and a dangerous liability. In the eyes of his detractors, Patton was a relic of a bygone era, a man whose time had passed. The impact of Patton's death on the early Cold War cannot be overstated. With his voice silenced, the advocates of a more confrontational stance toward the Soviet Union lost their most powerful champion. The policy of containment, which would define American foreign policy for the next 4 decades, became the dominant strategy. Had Patton lived, the history of the late 1940s might have looked very different. His death removed a significant obstacle to the establishment of the post-war order, a fact that has not escaped the notice of historians and conspiracy theorists alike. As we look back on the events of December 1945, the enigma of Patton's death remains unresolved. The official version, while plausible, is riddled with inconsistencies and unanswered questions. The conspiracy theories, while sensational, are grounded in the harsh realities of the intelligence world and the high-stakes politics of the era. Was it a tragic accident, a freak occurrence on a rain-slicked road? Or was it a cold-blooded assassination, a calculated move to eliminate a man who had become too powerful and too dangerous? The truth may never be fully known, but the mystery of Patton's death continues to haunt the annals of military history. The legacy of General George S. Patton, Jr. is one of brilliance, controversy, and enduring mystery. He was a man who lived his life on the edge, a warrior who thrived in the chaos of battle and struggled in the quiet of peace. His death, like his life, was a spectacle, a final, dramatic act in a career that had spanned 2 world wars and redefined the nature of armored warfare. Whether he was a victim of fate or a target of a conspiracy, Patton remains one of the most compelling figures in American history, a man whose shadow still looms large over the battlefields of Europe. The story of Patton's death is a story of the transition from the clear-cut battles of World War II to the murky, shadow-filled world of the Cold War. It is a story of power, betrayal, and the lengths to which men will go to preserve the order they have created. As the fog of time continues to settle over the ruins of Mannheim and the quiet graves of Luxembourg, the question remains, who killed Patton? The answer, like the man himself, is a complex tapestry of fact and fiction, a final, unresolved enigma that continues to challenge our understanding of the past. The mystery of General Patton's death is a stark reminder that even in the aftermath of the greatest conflict in human history, the battles for power and influence never truly end. Was it a simple twist of fate or a calculated strike from the shadows? We may never know for certain, but the evidence suggests that the official story is only part of a much larger, more disturbing truth. Given the evidence of missing reports, the lack of an autopsy, and the high-level political tensions of 1945, do you believe General George S. Patton was the victim of a tragic accident? Or was he assassinated to prevent him from exposing Allied secrets and challenging the Soviet Union? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.